Let's go back to, I guess it was a hot summer night, Savannah, Georgia, in 1989, August 1989. Now, there's two parts to the story. It's from what I read, and I'm not one who really believes in a certain web page that has alleges to have this true story of everything in the world. But I looked through some of the literature on the Davis website, and I checked quickly that site, that we all know what it is. And they said that there was an earlier shooting at a party, possibly involving Troy Davis, and that there was another part to this story in a parking lot in which the officer was killed. He was off duty, working, moonlighting as a security guard, and he came allegedly to the help of a homeless man who was allegedly being attacked, and there he was shot. Now tell us the story from, we'll talk about the prosecutor's side of the story, but what's the defense's side of the story? What happened that night?
Well, it's worth mentioning that Troy Davis did not have a very good defense, which is another common thing for people in capital cases. But I mean, there's no real evidence tying Troy Davis to these other crimes. The main evidence is that the same weapon that was used in the killing of the officer
McNeil, right?
McPhail, I believe.
McPhail. Officer McPhail.
It was used
earlier that evening
in those crimes. If
now, did they convict him of the earlier shooting also, or?
Yes, I believe
they
so.
did. Okay, so he was convicted of that and shooting the police officer.
In the separate or in the same trial?
In the same trial.
In the same trial, he was convicted of both shootings. Same judge, same. And how do they do it? I mean, usually isn't it one trial per crime, or?
I think that they were moving very fast.
Not necessarily.
No,
it's not necessary. They could do that. And
when they talk about severing trials, they're usually talking about different defendants being tried separately.
Right. But different, if they say that a person convicted of a series of crimes in the course of a night.
They don't have to have several different trials. They don't have
that. So that's interesting. So they convicted him of allegedly. Now, on what basis did they make that conviction? Because, like you said, they say they linked the gun from the earlier shooting to the second shooting, but never
did they
linked
link
that
him
gun.
to the weapon?
Right. So how?
That's the question.
They did it all on these.
The evidence in his case is not good. I mean, if they asked at one of the most recent times that they asked to that his evidence came before the court to review, they asked the prosecution straight up, if you take out these the witnesses, what do you have? And the prosecution said, not much.
Nothing.
Right.
Now let's talk a little bit about the history of his legal representation. Was he represented through the public defender's office or a private attorney with a?
I don't remember exactly what the nature of his public defender. One of the issues in whether it was a public defender or not. One of the issues in his case is that that makes it extremely shocking to people is that the reason why the new evidence in his case hasn't been able to introduce it is because of this law called the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act that prohibits death row inmates from introducing new evidence that comes up after a certain period of time.
Right. That was passed
and that's a federal law?
Under the Clinton administration.
Under the Clinton administration in 1996.
Yeah. And that's a federal law.
The federal law. And actually when the Supreme Court most recently ordered them, there was some talk about how this might be an unconstitutional law. And the reason I bring it up in response to your question is because he wasn't even really represented by anybody. There was no one really even legally sticking up for him until after his period when he could have legally introduced the evidence.
Oh, I see. Within that statute of limitations, nobody was helping him anyway.
The law specifically gives a very specific short period of time that you have
now,
to
do you
bring
have anywhere
habeas
people
corpus
can go for information about this case? Because
yes,
it's obviously always easier to sit down and read something.
There's been lots written about Troy Davis's case, and actually a good place to start is Troy's own website that's maintained by his sister Martina, who's also a member of our group. That's TroyAnthonyDavis.com. TroyAnthonyDavis.com. troydavis.com.
Well,
and then
since
also,
you bring up his...
and just to mention, please go to the website of the Campaign to End the Death Penalty, which is nodeathpenalty.org.
All right, great.
And also, we'll take your calls here live. We're live here in the studio, 212-757-1538, 212-757-1538. We're speaking with Ben Davis, no relation, about the case of Troy Davis, who is this gentleman facing execution, yet it's come to the Supreme Court's knowledge that the witnesses have recanted, except for one witness. Very interesting. Well, two really, but one who is really important. One witness who hasn't recanted, who was once a suspect in the case.
That's correct.
His name is Coles, right?
Sylvester Coles.
Sylvester Coles. He still sticks behind his story. He's the main witness.
I believe that they can't find him now.
Oh,
so, really?
But I'm not totally sure about that. I mean, I think just to say, I mean,
Coles was there. He was actually at the shooting, and he was at the party earlier that night, we mentioned, that was linked to the shooting. And yet, there was some strange... I mean, tell us a little bit. I mean, didn't he show up with a lawyer immediately? He started to finger Troy and say he was the guy right from the beginning. And
that's right. Sylvester Coles actually went to the police following the incident with a lawyer and said, you know, I want to tell you who did this. Troy Davis did it.
Okay, right from the beginning. And the police went right after Troy, yet there was no physical evidence linking either of them.
That's right. And actually, just to say the prosecutor in the case is a guy named Spencer Lawton. The original prosecutor is a guy named Spencer Lawton, who's actually quite a character himself. As a matter of fact, there's a pretty famous true crime book called Midnight in the Garden of Evil that's set in Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, sure.
Where Spencer Lawton actually features as a character.
Oh, really?
In the
book.
book.
Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. It's a great book.
Spencer Lawton was voted out of office recently. His last statement before he left was described as very unconventional, basically a defense of his continued persecution of Troy Davis, why he thinks he still did. And actually, if you're interested, if folks are interested, you can look up online that the guy who wrote Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil wrote a very good article for the Savannah paper, going through the statement he made, line by line, sort of debunking the prosecutor
in this case originally in 1989, very famous
Mm-hmm.
person.
debunking it, sort of like each of the reasons why he said that he thought.
Very interesting.
Okay,
now, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Please.
I was just going to ask you, because you brought up that his sister runs the website. Can we put sort of a human face on Mr. Davis now? Can you tell us a little bit about what he did before he was accused of the crime, and just tell us a little bit, something about him as a person? Yeah.
Well, I don't know Troy Davis. I have met Martina. His sister, Martina Correa, is a very brave woman and has been fighting very hard to get her brother's story out there. She actually, when the NAACP had their recent convention in New York, she actually spoke at the convention because his case has become such a symbol of the kind of situation particularly faced by African Americans with the criminal justice system. She actually spoke. Her son, Troy Davis's nephew, introduced the head of the NAACP. So everything I know about Troy Davis comes from Martina. But I mean, one of the things she said is that Troy Davis, they actually come from a middle class family.
Did he have a job before this happened?
I don't remember what he had a job.
Was a coach? I thought I saw he was a coach.
That may be true.